we're going to start off with our first speaker. Hopefully Charlie Ann's there ready to go. Charlie Ann is representing the Devon Federation of Young Farmers. She's an active member of Kingsbridge Young Farmers down in South Devon. I've had the pleasure of listening to this speech once before in a public speaking competition. I've listened to this speech before. It's really interesting, and it really highlights the importance of farmers and what the farmers do for us. So Charlie Ann, if you're happy to take it away, it's over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies, gentlemen and fellow farmers. I thank you for inviting me here tonight. I'm Charlie Ann Banks, I'm 13 years old and I'm an active member of Kingsbridge YFC. I only joined the club last year and I've thrown myself into all public speaking competitions possible. I would like to thank Chris Rice for asking me to speak here tonight on this webinar. He asked me to do this after I competed in the Junior Public Speaking County Final. I'm here tonight to talk to you about my passion for baking and how I wouldn't be able to fulfill this hobby if it wasn't for the British farmers and their continuous dedication. Some of you may already know, but baking is my passion and so is farming. I love baking because it's really relaxing and I can do it anytime. I love the reward when someone says your food tastes good, and when it makes someone smile. It's also so much fun. Baking desserts is what I really love. And if I had to pick a favourite dessert, it would either be a fudgy chocolate brownie or a white chocolate cheesecake. Another favourite of mine is baking cakes, as it's simple, easy and always tastes good. But when you're baking, do you ever think about where your ingredients come from? When I was last baking a traditional Victoria sandwich, I was thinking that metaphorically speaking, the British farmers have just helped bake and fill my cake for me. If you think about it logically, every single ingredient has come from one of our nation's farmers. Let me demonstrate to you how I've come to this conclusion. First, in baking a cake, you soften the butter. The milk that is needed to make the butter generally comes from a cow. For this milk, we must thank our dairy farmers. There are 13,000 active dairy farmers in the United Kingdom, producing over 14 billion litres of milk each year. And the UK is the 11th largest milk producer in the world. The dairy farmers' continuous hard work and dedicated routine 365 days a year ensures that our nation has a plentiful supply of fresh milk. Secondly, to make my cake, you need to add in the sugar. You need to add in the sugar to the butter and cream it together. 50% all the sugar consumed in the UK comes from sugar beet grown by our British farmers in eastern England. Around 7.5 million tonnes of sugar beet is grown per year in the UK. Sugar beet can't be planted, grown, nurtured or harvested without the nation's sugar beet farmers. So again, we must thank these farmers for their perfect care to our sweet ingredient. My next ingredient would be eggs. You add in 1 egg at a time, making sure that your mixture does not separate. Eggs obviously come from poultry, mainly chickens but sometimes ducks. The poultry can sometimes prove tricky to rear, as these farmers have to keep on top of the bird's disease and always ensure that the birds maintain a stable weight, light consumption and perfect temperature so that they lay beautiful eggs. We must thank these poultry farmers for their constant attention to detail to fulfil the request for fresh eggs. To finish my mixture, I fold in the flour. Flour is made from wheat, and for this wheat we must thank our arable farmers. Yet again, arable farming is an all-year-round process, from drilling, spraying, harvesting to storing, ploughing and starting again. Wheat is the most widely grown arable crop in the UK. Although our arable farmers do not tend to their crops in quite the same way our animal farmers do, their attention to detail is just as important to get the end result of a scientific process. Once I've lined my cake tins, filled them with my mixture and placed them in the oven, I start to make my jam. I prefer homemade jam with strawberries or raspberries. The strawberry or raspberry plant again has to be carefully nurtured by our knowledgeable fruit farmers. Ladies and gentlemen, yet again we must give thanks, but this time to our fruit farmers for consistently producing our colourful sweet and sharp fruits. Many of the UK's fruit farmers also grow vegetables. These farmers produce 3.5 million tonnes of fruit and vegetables every year, using 153,000 hectares of land. and the value of these fruit and vegetables is around £3.5 billion. These UK fruit and vegetable growers must meet strict requirements to achieve the Red Tractor standards, just like our livestock and arable farmers. To complete my jam, I must add my sugar. The last filling, which will complete my traditional Victoria sandwich, is the buttercream. This is where the dairy farmer and the sugar beet farmer meet again. The ingredients we require are butter and sugar whipped together to create a smooth, fluffy texture. Once the 2 halves of my cake are baked and cooled, I need to assemble it using my fillings to create an amazing traditional Victoria sandwich. Although this baking process only took about an hour, the ingredients used take many years to reach perfection. What's more, it will only take us 5 minutes to eat. So once again, I would like to say a big thank you to the British farmers for all their hard work and dedication. I hope you've enjoyed listening to me tonight and you now understand why our British farmers are so important to me and the wider community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlie-Anne. It's a really, really important message, and it highlights the reason why we're all here this evening. We appreciate the work that the farmers do for us, and we want to do everything we can to support them and help them. So that was fantastic. Thank you very much, and it was just as good as I remembered it from first time round. So well done, and thanks very much for coming along and speaking to us all. And as you can see in the comments up there, you've got plenty of comments there saying thank you and well done. So that's brilliant, Charlie-Anne. Thank you.
And it really wants you want to eat a cake right now as well. So
it certainly does. It certainly does. The slide that's on the screen at the moment is highlighting the work that young farmers will be doing next week and the week after with their members and focuses that they've got. So their website, devonyfc.co.uk, I think it is worth having a look at, and you can have a look on there how to sign up and become a young farmer, but also how to get involved with some of the other initiatives that they've got going on, and it really is worth having a look. And I'm sure Somerset young farmers will be doing the same along the same lines, but may well have some different activities as well. So thanks again to Charlie-Anne, that's fantastic, and we really appreciate you coming along this evening. So thank you. We should now move on to Billy, who is here representing Calm. So Billy, are you there? Are you able to speak to us?
Yeah, all good. Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. My name's Billy. I'm from Calm, which is the Campaign Against Living Miserably. Just wanted to say thank you very much to Devon, Somerset and Torbay Trading Standards for inviting us along to speak with you all this evening. It's really fantastic. We're really glad to be able to reach so many of you and speak with you, and hopefully speak with you going forward as well. We'll talk with you a little bit about what Calm is, what we do and why we do it. We are a suicide prevention organisation. The origins, where that came about, how we've operated during coronavirus and how that's affected us, and also how, most importantly, how we can help you and how you can get involved with Calm if you'd like as well. So just a little trigger warning that we'll be discussing some issues like suicide in this presentation, because of course we are a suicide prevention organisation, so just to make you aware of that in advance. And I'm even more glad that we're speaking with you today in light of an article that we all came across in our offices, remote offices, on the BBC last week, just last Thursday, which was a study from the Farm Safety Foundation, which showed that for farmers under the age of 40, 88% said that poor mental health is the biggest problem they face today, which was quite shocking. Really, it was a stat that we all came across, and we thought, wow, even more reason for us to come and speak with you all today. So I'm really glad and really grateful for the invite for us to come along. That wasn't the only stat. There was something from the Office for National Statistics, the most recent records from 2019, which showed that 133 people working in farming and agricultural trades in England, Wales and Scotland died by suicide in 2019, which is a number that, of course, any single death by suicide is a tragedy, and that number is far too high, and we want to help change that ultimately. And something that we think is quite optimistic is that the Farm Safety Foundation in this article also said that 89% of young farmers believe that talking about mental health in farming will help to remove the stigma attached to it. and we completely agree. We think that's absolutely spot on. And so one of the main things that I wanted to talk about is talking and encouraging all of you individually in your professional lives, but also in your personal lives as well, to talk and reach out and help, and how Calm can help with that as well. So who and what is Calm? While fully acknowledging the emotive nature of suicide and mental health, we often don't focus on the issue negatively, in inverted commas. We are a really positive organisation, and we try to focus on reasons for living. So we're a suicide prevention organisation, but our approach, in the most part, is very positive. It's not denying the real difficulty of the issue. It's just the approach that we take, and we act like a popular movement, really, in order to gather a real groundswell of individuals who otherwise might be difficult to engage, and that movement is what Calm is all about. So could I go on to the next slide, please? Fantastic. And one more. And one more again. Perfect. Thank you very much. So just some stats for you, some quite shocking stats, really. Well, we think they're quite shocking, and Calm exists to change them. Is that around 6,500 people die by suicide every single year. Next slide, please, Chris. And when you break it down, it's 125 people every single week dying by suicide, which is around 18 people every single day. And next one, please, Chris. And 75% of suicides are male. So an important point to make about Calm is that Calm traditionally started as an organisation which was aimed at male suicide prevention. We're now completely gender inclusive, and the reason we were focusing on male suicide is because it's such a big proportion, 75%, as we say, and we were really specialised in supporting people who identify as male and some specific issues that they face. But suicide is an issue that affects people of all genders and all backgrounds, and our helpline and our services, which I'll come on to talk about a little bit later, are there for anyone, regardless of your gender identity or any other identifying features. But it's just important to point out that it is definitely a particular problem for men in the UK and globally, but definitely in the UK, 75% of all suicides being male. Next slide, please, Chris. And in particular for young men. So one of the most standout things that we always say is that suicide is the single biggest killer of men under the age of 45 in the UK, which is just not okay. And Calm exists to change that. Next one, please, Chris. So Calm's origins, we originally launched as part of the Department for Health as a pilot study in 1997, and ran in various locations across the country. That lasted until 2004, when it was going to end, but there was so much support from local commissioners that Calm launched in its own right as a charity in 2006. And between 2006 and 2011, as I was saying, Calm focused on men, and specifically men between the ages of 15 and 35. But by 2011, it was clear that there were lots of men of an older age group who needed our support as well. So we broadened out to support people, men of all ages, beyond just that younger age group. And as I've said now, Calm is completely gender inclusive in who we support, and anyone can call our services for support. So just to take you through what we do, breaking it down into three main categories, really, and there's loads of stuff here for you guys to get involved with, but also for us to support you. As I was saying, it's really, we are here to help and support you, and we'd love for you to get involved with our campaign if you'd like. So the frontline services, the campaigning, and the collectives are our three main pillars of work. As I've said there, intervention, provocation, and collective action. I'll go through each of them in turn. So if we could just move on to the next one, please, Chris. So our life-saving work, the frontline services, we run a free helpline web chat every single day of the year from 5 p.m. until midnight, which is available to absolutely anyone in the UK. It's kind of 15 and over. There are lots of other fantastic charities that support younger people. Our services focus on people roughly the age of 15 and over. But apart from that, absolutely anyone can call us in the UK, and it's for anyone, regardless of what your issue may be. So you might just be having a bad day. It might be something that's been a cumulative issue that's been going on for a while, or you could be at the point of crisis. Anywhere along that spectrum, we're here to help. Can we have the next one, please, Chris? So just a bit of information about our helpline and web chat. It's anonymous, confidential, and non-judgmental, and that's really important for us as a feature. It's completely free. It's run by highly trained, paid professional staff, so this is quite a key feature of a helpline. There are obviously lots of fantastic support services out there who all run differently and all provide something slightly different, and different things work for different people. It's really important to acknowledge that, and it's important for you yourselves and anyone, your colleagues, to find things that work for you. We provide a particular form of service which we know works for a huge number of people, and if it works for you, we'd love you to use it. So the service is run by paid professional staff as opposed to volunteers, and those staff come from a range of related backgrounds, so things like counselling or social work or youth work and things like that, and then they're given extensive training for a number of months with us prior to working on our helpline and web chat services, more specialist knowledge around things like suicide. So they're really, really experienced people who are experts in talking to people and helping them work through a whole range of issues. So non-clinical advice, this is also quite an important point. So obviously clinical advice is really important as well, and getting that from your GP or other streams of support is really important. We provide non-clinical advice because we know that this works really well for some people as well, maybe to complement the clinical advice, or maybe just if they don't want something that clinical. So we use language which isn't clinical, everyday language, so to speak, and we know that a lot of people relate to that, and they find it easy to open up and talk using everyday language. So that's another really important feature of the helpline. And it's interventionist. By that I mean, for those people who do call when they're at a crisis point, we will intervene if necessary and if they want us to. So we have a number of people who call who are, this isn't the norm, but we do have a number of calls every year, hundreds really, of people who are in imminent danger and are in the process of planning or wanting to take their own life. And if they're calling us to essentially help remove themselves from that situation, we will do that, including through contacting emergency services for them. And that's why our staff are so well trained, continuously trained and experienced to manage these situations. I'll talk a little bit more with some stats on that in a second. It's solution focused, that's really important as well. So we try to help people create a little bit of a roadmap if they want that and plan forward. So they do provide a listening service if that's what someone wants, but if someone wants a bit more of an active role, an active intervention and a plan to help them make positive steps forward, we will do that as well. Great, next slide please, Chris. So last year we answered 140,000 calls on web and chats on the web chat. And next slide please. And directly prevented 556 suicides. So that's what I was just talking about in terms of direct intervention when necessary. So that's calculated by a call where someone contacts us and they are in the process of planning or acting out on intent to take their own life, and they are calling us because they want to actually remove themselves from that situation. And that's the number from last year alone, and there are similar stats from previous years as well. So when we talk about life-saving work, we're not saying that for dramatic effect. We mean it because there are consistently lots of people who need our life-saving service. just got a few quotes for you guys from people who have used our services. So we know that asking for help can be really hard, and it can be really daunting, especially if you're not used to doing it. We're well aware of that. And maybe picking up the phone or going on a web chat feels like too big a step, and that's totally understandable. We've got loads of resources on our website as well, like Get Help articles, which are there, which you can read in your own time, and which you don't have to, which may feel like less of a step than picking up the phone. So it's really important to know that we have other resources as well. If you're not quite ready to pick up the phone or go on the web chat, or you feel maybe, you're not, that's not quite right for you, we've got loads of really fantastic articles and resources as well, which you might find more suitable for you as well. So feel free to check them out. There'll be more information, links, which I can share around as well, where you can access all of that. They talk about all sorts of issues that breakdowns on things like anxiety, depression, loneliness, financial worries, anger management, all sorts of things that our helpline staff deal with. We also have digital articles which people can use and read through if that works for you as well. So there's different services that work for different people. Okay, great. Next slide, please, Chris. So alongside that, that's our frontline work and frontline services. To complement that, we do a lot of campaigning. So this is about spreading awareness of the importance of mental health and suicide prevention, and getting to people hopefully before they reach crisis point. So it's almost like we do our campaigning work, just hopefully stop people from getting to the point where they need to use the services, but then the services are there for anyone who does still need them. So our campaigning work is about shaking things up essentially and breaking down barriers, societal barriers and societal ideals that we don't think are healthy. We do this collaborating with all sorts of people to create campaigns and give mental health and suicide the attention that it needs in the mainstream population, and inspiring people to take positive action as well in their own lives, in their families, in their workplaces, and more broadly on a societal level. And the main thing we do is challenge harmful stereotypes, in particular harmful male stereotypes, and encourage positive behavioural change. And I've got a few examples of some of our campaigns. So on the next slide, one of our biggest ones is called Project 84 from a couple of years ago, which was working with families of men who lost to suicide, and ITV. We created a big installation which was about getting people to stop and think about the issue, and most importantly act on the issue. Really, we wanted to provoke a conversation that we didn't feel like that was happening enough, and got millions of people to talk about suicide, and set up a petition along with this big installation, calling on government to have some tangible action on suicide, and it really did work. As a result of our work and consultation with the government, they created the first ever Minister for Suicide Prevention, which didn't exist before, and now it does, and that's fantastic. And they're doing lots of ongoing work around the issue as well. So the campaign was to create conversation around it, but also lead to some kind of tangible change, and there's the outcome from it. Next slide, please, Chris. Another example, quite different, was the Best Man project. The premise being around being a best man, and why wait until your wedding day to be your friend's best man. The idea being you can be a best man to your friends all the time, and show them that you appreciate them, and encourage positive behaviour, especially men to men in terms of friendships and relationships. So we brought together lots of personalities for this, as you can see in the picture, and a main part of the project was encouraging light-hearted, casual conversations to check in on your friends, and check in, but also just have fun and encourage that, because some people do that, but a lot of people don't, and it would be really beneficial for themselves and for their friends. So very different in tone, really, to the previous campaign, but also having a really important effect. Great, and the next slide, please, Chris. The third pillar of our work is our collectives. So we've got the frontline services, the campaigns, and then our collectives, which is our grassroots work, really, which are organic groups that are in local community spaces and that bring people together around a shared passion point, whatever that passion point may be. So it might be a form of sport or a form of music or art or things like that. And it's about that. So they're not therapy groups, but they're groups that will help promote positive mental well-being through enjoyment and participation of that shared passion point. So we've got lots of football teams all across the country, for example, who are calm collectives, and their friends who come together and play, and they love the physical element of it, but it's really beneficial for their mental well-being and things like that. So the collectives and that kind of grassroots work and the campaigning and the big societal change that we're pushing for there, as well as individual change, are all really important things that we do, which ultimately we hope will lead in the end to people not needing to use services. But of course, you know, that's going to take a long time, and the services are absolutely essential and vital as well. And that's why our frontline services are there to help catch anyone who needs them, whether you're just having a bad day or whether you're having a really, really tough time. Those services will also always be there to support people who need them. But hopefully you can see from there the complementary nature of the frontline work, but also the behavioural change campaigns and the grassroots work through the collectives as well. Great, and next slide please, Chris. So yeah, lots of collectives running, football, art, all sorts of things like that, but we're really open to people creating new collectives as well, whatever your passion is, whether it's baking like we had before, or other things like that. You can create a collective around anything. Great, and the next slide please. I'll just run quickly through Calm during COVID-19 and how it's affected us as a charity during the last 12 months or so. So the next slide please, Chris. So yeah, right now our life-saving services are needed more than ever as you'd expect. Next slide please. So at the height of lockdown 1, demand for our services were up between 30 and 40%, which is huge, obviously. Clearly, people needing more support because of the current situation. Next slide, please. And with some of the stats earlier, our staff answered a call to someone every 66 seconds. And they help support people on a whole range of issues, as it says there. Yeah, and we will continue to be here to support people who need us no matter what. The helpline and web chat will be there for people completely free, completely anonymously, to support anyone who needs our help. So please do signpost to it if you think someone would benefit from speaking to someone anonymously. There's our number, there's the web chat. I'm really happy to circulate all of this afterwards as well, but that's where to go every single day of the year, 5 PM till midnight. It's there for you. So how you can make a difference. So that's all the stuff that we are here to help with. There's also loads of ways that you can help as well. And we'd really encourage you to do some of these things. Next slide, please, Chris. The first thing is a really simple ask. It's just to check in on a friend. Just check in and ask twice. That's a really important ask. Asking once, it's very easy for people to brush it off and say, yeah, I'm fine, move on, quickly, done. Asking twice really shows that you care, and it's a really powerful way of making someone think, that person cares about me, that person wants to listen to me, and if I'm having a difficult time, they're here for me. So I really, really encourage all of you to just check in on a friend, and if they seem a bit resistant, some people need their space, of course, but ask twice, be persistent, because you don't know until you ask necessarily what someone's going through. Okay, thanks. Next slide, please, Chris. Alongside that, we know that some people find it difficult speaking with family and friends. That's totally understandable. For some people, speaking to someone anonymously is really helpful. So signpost to support services like ours, like I say, we are really fantastic for a huge number of people with our particular approach. We know there are other approaches out there which are also fantastic. If you think Calm sounds like it would be good for yourself or someone you know, friends, family, colleagues, whoever, please signpost to us. We are here to help. And the next slide, please, Chris. Fundraise and donate, of course. We only run because of amazing support from people. So we would encourage any of you as individuals, with your friends or at work, if you would like to raise awareness of the issue and help fundraise for us, that would be fantastic. £8 saves funds a potentially life-saving call. So we don't set fundraising targets or anything like that. Any support is greatly appreciated. So if you are interested in fundraising, head to our website, drop me an email. We'd be really happy to help you along the way with that. And I think that's it. There might be one more slide, Chris. No, that's it. So thank you very much, everyone. Real pleasure to speak with all of you today. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them whenever is most suitable in this presentation, but also afterwards as well. Yeah, so thanks very much.
That's fantastic, Billy. Thank you very much. Like you say at the start, some of the statistics at the start are really, really quite disturbing. And the timescales and the number of people is just something that you wouldn't really imagine. So yeah, it's just horrendous. So thank you very much, and the work you guys are doing is fantastic. So thank you very much for coming to speak to us, particularly. I know your focus necessarily isn't always on farmers, but everybody's included, and that's the key bit of what you're offering. So I think you've already agreed to share some resources with us at Trading Standards. And then if anybody would like to contact me or contact the Trading Standards Service as a whole, we can pass on Billy's contact details for more information or that sort of thing anytime. If I'm assuming you're happy with that, Billy. Sorry, I'm making the offer and haven't run that past you first.
No, that's absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Be really happy to speak with anyone, whether you're an individual, whether you're an organisation going forward. We'd be really, really happy to help and speak with you guys, email, phone call, whatever. So please feel free to get in touch.
That's fantastic.
I just wanted to say thank you very much as well, Billy. Obviously I got in touch with you, and I must say, reiterate what Chris just said. The numbers when you said 125 people a week is really quite shocking, and certainly the Project 84 campaign, it certainly gave me goosebumps. And I know we spoke about, obviously you guys are based in London, but how it's something that I think we're all conscious of. How do we actually reach, grassroots? How do we get this message out to farmers that aren't online? And I think that's something that all our organisations are very conscious about. And I think the fact that you still have a helpline that people can physically talk to is an amazing thing. We need to keep that going. So obviously, hopefully we can work a bit more together now with, reaching out to the rural community. And I know as well, we had a comments, Caroline from Northumberland, which is great that you're here with us tonight, Caroline, asking about different groups, so for retired farmers, and that's certainly something that we'd also looked at. And I know, Billy, you'd said about where you have sort of football, cricket groups, etc. So I think it's just, obviously thinking, it's certainly given us some ideas just listening to you, and we'll certainly catch up about it, and perhaps there's some way we can sort of move forward with looking at groups, as you said, to promote the positive well-being. But yeah, it was a really good talk. Thank you, Billy, very much.
No, very welcome. We are really, really keen to reach as many people as possible, especially people who are isolated, whether that's because of technology, geographical location, whatever it is. So really, really keen to hear from anyone who would like more support.
Great, thank you.
Our next speaker is Keith. Keith here is coming along to represent the Gay Farmer Helpline. And if you're happy, Keith, I'll leave you to introduce yourself if you like.
That's fine. Yes, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for inviting me, of course. I have to give a word of warning at the very start. I keep getting a message coming up on the computer saying that my internet connection is unstable. Some would say it's not the only thing around here that's unstable, but we'll leave that to you to judge for afterwards. If I suddenly disappear, just talk among yourselves for a minute and I'll get back to you. So let me start off by telling you a little bit about a farmer that I work with. We'll call him James. And James is a farm worker in the northeast and is bipolar. He's also gay, but in general, he doesn't want people to know about that side of his life. He's single and he's an excellent worker and a very clever person. The problem is that when he's high, he'll tell his employers how things should be run and what they're doing wrong. And when he's down, he has problems dragging himself to work. You get the idea. He can be very difficult to work with, to say the least. I'm not sure if he's harder when he's high or when he's low. When he was off center, he rang me several times a day. There were times when I could have screamed, and when I'd put the phone down, I very often did. And then I got a card from him later on saying thank you. And if I hadn't been there, he would have topped himself. So how did we reach the point where we were able to help people like James? And to explain this fully, I need to go back a bit. One of the main problems in the farming community one of the main problems that the farming community faces is isolation. In the good old days, there were a lot of workers on the land, and there were very many small farms. So the farmers joined together to help each other, especially at times like harvest. They got opportunities to talk with each other, even if it was only to complain about the boss or the weather. In addition, the work was not as mechanized as it is today. There were horse-drawn plows, etc., and it was normal to talk to the horse. If you talk to the tractor, you're likely to be seen as being slightly odd, shall we say. As the years have moved on, farming has become more and more mechanized and needs less and less labor. Some workers start ploughing in the morning and they see no one all day long. Many farms are now a one-man band, and the pressure is on to do the work as quickly and as efficiently as they possibly can, and to do it on your own. When there's any time off, farmers are often so tired they just go to bed or slump in front of the television. Farmers always used to be the mainstay of the local church and the village community. Due to the lack of time and energy, this is very often no longer the case. Incomers have often filled the void, and so the farmers feel not only isolated, but sidelined as well. And this, combined with the difficulties that farming has been facing for several years, means that depression is an industrial disease. And unfortunately, farmers are very near the top of the occupations facing the risk of suicide. The next problem is that farmers are fiercely independent, so go to the doctors very often as a last resort. I've even worked with some who have moved farm many years ago and never registered with their local doctor. They don't suffer with depression, they're just feeling a little bit down, when actually they're in full-blown depression. The chaplaincy that I ran started over 20 years ago, and I became very used to dealing with cases of depression and people verging on suicide. And because farmers are loath to seek help, the clinical commissioning groups funded part of my work so that I could go to farmers, or members of my team could go to farmers to help and try and get them to seek professional medical advice. I suffer with depression myself, and I was a farmer who suffered at the hands of Edwina Curry. So when I'm with farmers, they know that I understand on all fronts. As a result, they'll often open up to me. The work jogged along steadily for several years. It was growing until I got a team of chaplains around me. Then a new and major aspect of my work started to develop. Over the course of 3 or 4 years, I was finding that I worked with a very small number of farmers who were gay. Their sexuality was causing great concern for them, even more so than if they had been in ordinary occupations. Let me explain a little bit further. First of all, attitudes in the countryside on matters such as the gay issue tend to be 10 to 15 years behind those in urban areas. So it isn't always seem to be as acceptable to be gay as it would be in the urban areas. When a farmer dies, the farm will in some cases be left to the children in shares, but with one of them running the farm. The idea is that the other members of the family get a return on their investment. The way farming has been for several years, there's been no return, but the value of the property has risen dramatically. Where the current farmer is gay, the families see that there will be no heir to carry on the farm, and at present time you can forget any ideas about gay partnerships or adopting children. So they see that they might as well sell the farm and get a return on their investment now. Because of the isolation that we've spoken about before, they feel that they're the only gay farmer in the world. I've already said that mental health issues are an industrial disease in farming. The farming occupation, as we've mentioned, is at the top of the suicide list. Mental health problems for gay people are also a huge cause for concern. 1 in 4 gay men will attempt suicide at some time in their lives. If you combine those 2 sets of statistics, you've got a recipe for disaster. Farms are asset rich and income poor so very often. So the question of divorce is very often a non-starter. Split a farm that's making no money into 2 and you don't stand a chance. My gut feeling was that I was touching the tip of the iceberg, and so started to do some research. I went to the National Statistics Office from the government and was told that there were 8,744 farmers or farm workers in Cheshire, which is where I was based at the time. My immediate reaction was rubbish. There aren't that many. But I expected to have to add on the 80-year-old father who was still vital to the running of the farm, and the wife who was a teacher all day, but was then expected to work on the farm as well. And the government had taken all this into account, and so the figures looked about right. And it's not very often the government gets it right, but they did in this case. Based on the generally accepted figure of about 8.4% of men being gay, that meant that there were 367 gay farmers in Cheshire. And I had to assume that half of the 8,744 were male. And I'm sure the actual figure in the farming industry would be higher than that. There seemed to be a huge problem if there were 367 gay farmers or farm workers in Cheshire alone. So I trawled the internet to try and find other agencies to see if help was available. I couldn't find anything apart from some very interesting porn sites, which we'll forget about for the time being. So I set up a helpline and a 1-page website. I put a 3-line advert in Farmers Guardian during Christmas week, and it's run since. In the first 6 months, I had 52 individuals call me. Some were one-off calls, and some developed into cases where I would speak to them on a daily basis for weeks on end. Nearly all of them were over 50, and remember that it was illegal when we were younger. We're of the generation as well, where the police were always right. So if the law said that it was wrong, then it was wrong. About half of the callers are married. And don't forget, the pressure to marry and produce an heir in the farming community is enormous. Nearly everyone feels that they're the only gay farmer in the world. Far from it. and a large percentage have either tried or considered trying suicide. Depression is very common. As I've already said, statistics among gay men show that sometime or another, 1 in 4 will attempt suicide. If you combine that with the high suicide rate among the farming community in general, it's obvious that there's a huge problem. There were difficulties for the helpline. Funding is a big problem, and finding extra help seemed almost impossible. Farmers talk with farmers, so helpers need to be farmers or have a farming or at least a rural background. In addition, the helper has to be gay and preferably understand what depression is about at first hand. A tall order, to say the least. Then in January 2011, the press office for the Methodist Church contacted me with a view to arranging a publicity drive. They felt that the church had had so much bad press over the years that it was time to redress the balance. And it took until May to get the press release right, but then it was released on Farming Today on Radio 4 at the beginning of May. Everything was set for a great deal of publicity, and the actual amount surprised both myself and the press office. I conducted over 30 radio interviews. The gay press picked up on it. The church press picked up on it. Surprisingly, none of the farming press picked up on it. I expected some negative responses, but in the end, I only had 13 people during the publicity drive who objected to either myself or the work that I was doing. Unfortunately, 2 or 3 have been exceedingly unpleasant. Then the local press picked up on the story. And at the very end of all the publicity, I ended up with pictures of myself on the front page of all the local papers in Cheshire. So there was going to be no hiding, even if I'd wanted to. Interestingly, though, I received no negative comments from the farming industry in Cheshire or from churches in general. Many of the callers were looking for social contact as they were extremely lonely. And I decided to arrange a secret Facebook group. And this is proving reasonably popular with 166 members at present. It's growing steadily, and I've started an open group as well, which has got 457 members. We arrange social functions for gay farmers, such as meals, etc. But this aspect of the work is slow and difficult, even more so, of course, with COVID at the present time. Let me explain to you a few examples of those I've worked with. For obvious reasons, I've changed names, etc. But all the basic facts are true. John had just celebrated his 50th birthday. He emailed me several times so that he didn't have to disclose his name or address or anything like that. He'd never told anyone that he was gay. After a while, he was confident enough to phone me. We eventually met, and we now talk on a very regular basis. He's gradually accepting his sexuality, and I'm helping him to see it as a positive thing, a positive part of his life, rather than as a negative part of his life. And he's come a long way over the last few months. Arthur is married, and he had a partner that no one knew about. The partner got cancer and eventually died. Arthur couldn't go to the funeral because he didn't exist as far as the partner's family was concerned. He couldn't grieve openly. His wife would wonder and start to ask questions. And it was a very sad situation. But at least there was somebody there for him to talk to and to explain things about and to help him to grieve. James is in his 50s. He's got 2 children. He's married. He accepted that he was gay too late in life. He has a good farm, and his wife isn't aware that he's gay. He feels trapped. He wants a partner. He daren't tell his wife. He daren't risk a divorce. He loves his children. He doesn't want to hurt his wife. He says she isn't a bad woman. I just shouldn't have married her. And he sees no future. And I could repeat James's story over time and time again with different names. Some of you will have heard this story from my website if you looked at it. And this is the story that really got to me because it was so very similar to the things I enjoyed doing. Because Clive's a farmer's son, and he enjoyed doing nothing more when he was a youngster than going round the fields with his dad late at night, checking the stock, checking the snares, etc., making certain that the gates were all fastened. And it was this that I enjoyed doing with my father when I was a child as well. And he did this regularly. And he was out with his father one evening when they found a car in the gateway. A hose pipe was connected from the exhaust to the interior of the car, and the engine was running. Clive's father smashed the window and dragged the man out of the car. He was still alive. At the subsequent inquiry, it turned out that the man was gay and couldn't cope with the situation, so he was trying to kill himself. Clive's father said that if he had known that, he would have left the man to die. And Clive, who already knew that he was gay, grew up in the belief that if his father ever discovered out that he was gay, his father would leave him to die in that sort of a situation. Now, obviously, we'll never know whether that would have been the case or not. Quite likely it wouldn't. But he lived with that view, that feeling for over 40 years before he told me the story and admitted that he was gay. And I was the first person he'd admitted that to. Finally, I was talking to one of the gay farmers that I worked with who lived locally in Cheshire when I was there. When the local paper came out about me, he was at a bowling match. I was the topic of conversation, as you can imagine, and they were discussing the articles about me. And they decided that based on the statistics that I'd given them, there must be at least one of them at that bowling match who was gay. I asked him what he did. He said, I kept ever so quiet, but I did notice that another of those farmers kept very quiet as well. So where do we go from here? I've no idea. I've now retired as lead chaplain for the agricultural chaplaincy team in Cheshire, but I'm keeping on the Gay Farmers Helpline. My husband and I moved over to Northern Ireland 4 years ago, and I'm faced with all sorts of fresh challenges with the helpline for over here as well. Farmers aren't naturally at home in gay areas of the cities. Fear is a huge problem. Social groups are difficult to promote. Funding is a problem. And so I plod on. And this is where I have to come back to where my core work was and is. And remember that as a chaplain, I have to leave it in his hands and trust that this work, which I believe he's started, will continue. Thank you very much for listening.
Keith, thank you very much. That was the really moving conversation. Well, it's conversation, a speech you've just given us, and the feeling of isolation that people must feel, and that feeling of kind of hopelessness and whatever must be horrendous. So I'd like to thank you for the work you're doing, I don't really know what to say, Keith, to be honest, but as you can see from the comments here, you've got people that, commenting here as well. You know, the work you're doing is incredible, and you know, giving people that kind of that voice and that ability to speak to someone and share a problem is brilliant. So thank you very much, and thanks very much for joining us this evening. I think it's really important and raised a huge amount of issues for everybody to think about. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, could I just ask Keith? Sorry, it's Becky. Yeah, it was that was really hard hitting and yeah, really emotive. And it's probably it's almost like a sort of taboo subject within the farming area, not one that we, you wouldn't obviously know. I mean, how can we help, and how, I know you're based in Ireland, but do you have sort of literature? Because obviously from this, the stories that you're sort of telling us, obviously people don't want to come out in front of others, and obviously that's one of the hardest things. Is there some sort of literature we could, I don't know, put down at markets or where we're visiting, if people don't obviously want to sort of, ask us for help or anything? Is there something that we can sort of help with that?
There is literature we do. That's not a problem at all. The fact that I'm in Northern Ireland really doesn't matter at all, because the way the helpline is set up, they don't know where they're ringing at all. Okay. It's very rare that there will be an actual visit to a farm. When I was chatting before, the first thing that I wanted to do was get on the farm and find out how things were going, who was in control, or whether they'd lost it or whatever.
Yeah.
But of course, in these cases, the last thing they want is for us to get onto the farm. Yeah. Because otherwise the farm workers want to know who's this that's come, or his wife might want to know who's this that's come. So it isn't a problem. I'm over this way. We can handle things from over here quite easily. Plenty of literature for anybody who wants anything.
Great, thank you very much. Sorry, I think Stephen Dennis from FCN has a question.
Yes, yeah. Well, I've known Keith for many years now. When he was with
Don't you dare say how many years, Stephen.
And for those of you that can't see Keith, and would like to know what he looked like, for those of you that know the actor Ryan Reynolds, Keith is absolutely nothing like him.
I'll put the camera on. I don't care what you say. Can I be seen now? Is that better?
Becky, just one point really that I'd like to point out with reference to your comment, that the Farming Community Network have the contact details of the Gay Farmer website and telephone number, and we often, will refer to the Keith helpline. So.
Oh, great! That's brilliant. Yeah, it's probably something we've never probably spoken about. So really great to have Keith on tonight, and opened our eyes to another area that we can possibly help put people in touch with. Certainly.
Exactly. That's my thought. Exactly. Really, it's not something that I had considered massively, and I just the idea of someone feeling at that stage in their life that they can't speak to someone, it must be horrendous. So no, we can definitely make sure we include some of that in our help packs and things. That would be brilliant. Has anybody else got any other questions for Keith before we move on to the next speaker? Anybody else like to make any contributions? No, I'll take the silence as a no. But again, thanks very much, Keith. And if you're happy to hang around, we'll do a bit of a question and answer session at the end. If you're happy to contribute then as well, that'd be brilliant.
That's fine by me. Yes, thank you.
Fantastic. So the next speaker lined up for this evening is Ellie. Hopefully Ellie's there.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And I feel a bit of an interloper. I'm from Dorset, as you can see from the slide here, and I'm not gay, but I am partly a farmer, and I'm married to a farmer, and I'll have some strong conversations with him later to check that he's okay being married to me. So I'm from Dorset, and we farm sheep on Chalk Downland, and I work on the farm 3 days a week, and the other 4 days of the week I work in a psychological therapy service. And I hope that we are the very sort of service that could be of benefit to people that Keith might be meeting, and that might come and provide receive some psychological therapies from us before they need to get in touch with the fabulous but high level of severity service that Billy is part of, called CALM. So I'm part of a national improving access to psychological therapy service. And I think the reason for being here is because although I'm an interloper and I come from Dorset, there are services in Devon, and the details are here, and also in Somerset. So I hope that I can talk as a representative for all three counties, and knowing that, you know, geographical boundaries are drawn across bits of land where we have edges, so we cross over. So we are open to anybody. We are 18 to the grave, and we, again, a bit like Billy and like Keith, we're open to everybody. Anybody that wants to see us can do so, and they can do that in a variety of ways. So although there's a lot of virtual worlding at the moment, there's a lot of video conferencing and contact over the phone, we also we offer all of those things, but we also offer face-to-face. And for some people, they want face-to-face. So we are pleased to be offering face-to-face appointments as well as video conference calls like this on a one-to-one basis. We also offer courses, which I'll talk about in a minute, and assessment can take place face-to-face, by telephone, or on a sort of Zoom kind of platform. So let's talk a bit about what we do. We offer free support to the sorts of problems that we're hearing a lot about in the media, and it's so good that you guys in Devon have really got a steel on the march of really reducing stigma and talking about mental health issues, and I really commend you for your works in this area. It's wonderful. So we work with people who have, for whatever reason, low mood issues, stress issues, trauma issues that can happen. The person pulling somebody out of a car might go on to suffer some traumatic symptoms. So we treat trauma often called PTSD. Accidents on farms are unfortunately very common. We have had suicides, and we've worked with the people, the partners or farm workers who have found a colleague or a partner who has killed themselves, and again that can be very traumatic. So that leaves an imprint that, again, we are open to working with and we offer therapy for. We also are very pleased to be working with the adjustment that comes with maybe getting diagnosed with long-term conditions. The farming community is not immune from having long-term conditions. In fact, we're more likely to have them. My husband's moved straw and hay around, has got terrible lung damage from it, and that is quite significant, especially at this time with the COVID thing going on. There are things like diabetes, it's an added pressure. I'm diabetic. Heart diseases, they can be an added stressor to an already stressful occupation. Wonderful at times, beautiful at times, but stressful too. So having a busy life and not too much time, isolation, problems with politics and farming, financial support, and then you get diagnosed with cancer. That could just be the straw that breaks the camel's back. So we are really happy to take a call or an email from anybody self-referring in, or go via a GP and ask to be referred to the service in your area, and that can be done. If you don't want to go through your GP, that's completely fine, and you'll see the websites and telephone numbers that can give you access to those teams. So we have a selection of different therapies and therapists. Counselling, I think, is fairly well known now as a form of talking therapy, but also there is another treatment which is becoming better known called cognitive behavioural therapy. It's got very good recovery rates. We have good recovery rates in the treatments that we offer, and we use CBT as part of that treatment sort of menu that we offer. We also offer a treatment called EMDR, and that's a treatment for trauma. for PTSD. We are offering treatment on a one-to-one basis. That can be quite important. Maybe somebody suffering from a bereavement would like to talk through that and adjust to that with a counsellor, coming to terms with living with a long-term condition, or maybe losing part of a farm. Anything at all can be talked about and processed with a trained therapist in the form of a counsellor. For types of problems like becoming socially anxious, and that can happen the more isolated we get. I think for some of us it can give us a great thirst to go to the market and catch up with people when we can, but for others actually it can become harder and harder to do it. And so CBT is really useful for working over a number of sessions on particular anxiety disorders, and we consider trauma to be an anxiety disorder. So that is cognitive behavioural therapy. And we have another team of people called psychological wellbeing practitioners, and they'll work with people for a small number of sessions, just dealing with low-level symptoms of people feeling stressed out, worried, low in mood. The other parts of the team will work for a bit longer. We normally work for between 6 and 15 sessions, and I'm really pleased to say that's not very long, and we get recovery for an awful lot of people in those short number of sessions. So I would say it's a really good reason actually for stepping forward and coming to seek some support from a talking therapies service like ours. Yeah, let me tell you just a little bit about the courses that we're running. And these can be, I think, actually doing some video work for farmers. My father-in-law, who has retired from farming now, still got his tractor which he drives around the yard and uses for taking the recycling down. He's more tech savvy than I am. I can tell he's constantly on the computer. So for some people, we mustn't make assumptions about their lack of technical skills, but it can really open up the ability to be on the farm, live a really busy life and not have to drive in for an hour to go to an appointment. So for some people, that video format for receiving therapy saves a lot of time, and you can be at home and keep an eye on things as well as having the therapy. So we offer an awful lot of courses in that sort of way. I'll just give you some of the titles of those because they're quite self-descriptive. So we've got a 10-session course called Lift Your Mood. We've got a 6-session course called Overcoming Stress, Worry and Low Mood. We've got, I think it's a 7-session course called Living Well with a Long-Term Condition. And we've recently set up a course, not one that we wanted to, but it's called Grief in the Time of COVID. Just really for people suffering from the effects of loss and maybe not being able to go and honour somebody's death in the normal sort of ways and feeling a bit stuck with that. So I think that probably gives you an overview. I don't want to give you too much information. It's just giving you an open door. Please spread the word. Tell people. I'm really keen to keep a link open with Billy and Calm. I'd like Calm to know that if you receive calls from the Dorset, Devon, Somerset area, please contact us. Make a referral on behalf of the person if they're happy for you to do that. So networking out, as you guys are all really keen on doing, waving the banner for the services. That, I think that really is a good thing. So I'll close there and happy to receive a question or comment from Becky, I think has put her hand up there.
Oh yeah, hi, sorry, me again, Ellie. I just wanted to say, I think it's evenings like this and having everyone get together and meet each other is so useful. I was unfortunate enough, a farmer who I did regard as a friend and knew very well, he lost his life at the end of last year in an accident. And I know the person that found him, and you can see he wants to talk about it. It was very distressing circumstances, and I think, you know, had I known now that you guys are there, it just goes to show how important this is, because I could have put him in touch with you, and I probably will still now because it was all very recent. But I just think, like for Billy talking and Keith and yourself, you know, with our experiences on farm, I'm just jotting down names of people that I know I can refer already. So I just wanted to say thank you again, because it's just so helpful. And if I'm jotting down names, I'm sure many other people listening are. So it really goes to show how, you know, we can expand what we're hearing tonight to farmers and colleagues, you know, that we know. So thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Never too late for you, for that person. That will still be sitting with them in some way. So we would really promote them receiving an assessment and possibility of treatment.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ellie. Is there any other questions or queries for Ellie before we move on? No, so I'd like to say thank you as well, Ellie, for coming along. And like you say, you may not be in Devon and Somerset, but what you've talked about, I know that for definite that it's happening in Devon, and it's something that I've used in the past to help me get over a few issues as well. So the work you guys do is really valuable, and it really does work. It's got me from some dark places up to being able to stand up and talk in something like this. So it's so what you're doing is brilliant. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And yeah, hopefully we can forward over some details and keep people coming your way really and get the help that they need. So thanks again. So we move on our evening of speakers. We've got a lot of people to speak to this evening, and the next up on the list is Andy. Hopefully, Andy, you're there.
I think I am.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Good.
Yes. Are you happy to introduce yourself, Andy? Or would you like me to do it for you?
You can do it for me if you like. I mean, some of it will come out as I talk, but if you want to do a quick précis, that's fine, because it will probably be more true than what I'll say.
Oh, well, I don't know about that. Andy is someone that those of you that are local to Devon and Somerset might have seen at market. I bump into Andy not as often as I used to with COVID, but and Andy's there as a listening ear, a point of contact for anybody who would like to have a conversation and would like to get a little bit of help and support on the time. Andy again is somebody who's very good at teasing out issues without realizing that that's what he's doing, and is able to give a very useful opinion on things, which is great. So we've got Andy Gerard. Over to you.
Thank you, Chris. It's good to talk. So said a BT advert quite a few years ago. Everybody needs someone to talk to at some time in their life. So might have said Socrates, Shakespeare, or one of the Simpsons. And everything that follows hereafter is based around those two quotes. Because everybody has a story to tell. And everyone should have the right to tell that story and tell it from their perspective, because it shapes what they think, how they react, who they've become, and often the trajectory on which they're set. And everyone also needs the opportunity to tell that story. And this is where this story starts. In the early 1990s, or even possibly the late 1980s, and it's amazing how quickly some of these details become unclear, there was someone, or possibly a few rural folks, all of whom happened to be members of the Methodist Church, who'd noticed significant changes in agriculture and in the rural population. Some of these changes were because the golden era of joining the EU had already passed. The sweeteners had run out. There was talk of food mountains and lakes, which actually were no more than molehills or ponds, but did lead to milk quotas and the fear of other quotas. For a generation that had been brought up to believe that their duty was to try and feed an ever-increasing world population, this was rather more than just a culture shock. In addition, wages were rising and the Equal Pay Act had come into force a few years earlier. And although both those things were worthy in their own right, It had caused many farmers to look at their workforce and reduce it to try and keep the costs in check. There had also been questions about food safety, not least, as we've already heard, Edwina Curry and her comments about salmonella. I've never said this before, but I'm just thinking we might need to be thankful to Edwina Curry, because that's how we got the Gay Farmer Helpline. Keith, I think, has already alluded to how that affected his life. Other livestock farmers were under the cosh because of bovine spongiform encephalopathy, because they had to deal with that in its own right, and the long-term effects on the safety of beef, and by extrapolation other foods as well, and the loss of export markets. So this in itself tightened the screw on farmer incomes, particularly in this part of the world, and therefore the ability to afford staff. And as we've already heard, when things get tight, there are often less people on farm for a farmer to chat to. The postman left the letters at the end of the lane instead of popping in for a cup of tea. The visiting grocer, butcher, baker, laundryman, and other tradesmen were virtually extinct. And the reduction in clergy and their increased workloads meant there were less opportunities for the vicar, the minister, or the pastor to pop in as they once formerly done. And as we know and have already established, when the number of casual visitors reduces, then folks feel increasingly isolated and could turn in on themselves. The problems spiral, and anyone with a long-term involvement with agriculture realises that suicides tend to increase, or at the very least, life becomes a continuing, tiring, constant battle. And of course, when that's recognised, everybody says something must be done. And what these Methodists did was raise money for the first rural support worker, whose job was to listen to some of these stories in a way which encouraged and enhanced people's lives. And that is the mantle which I took over 10 and a bit years ago. However, when I took on the role, they also wanted me to see more people in the same hours as my predecessors, and it was a part-time job. And the suggestion was that my line manager, the greatly missed Reverend John Peake, and I looked at livestock market chaplaincy. Now, there is nothing new under the sun. And just to warn you, here comes the churchy bit. Jesus spent much of his time in people's workplaces with arable farmers, pig farmers, shepherds, viniculturalists, fishermen, and for good measure, philosophers, doctors, and taxmen. And that is how Jesus understood the joys and sorrows of the workplace. So therefore, chaplaincy is at least 2,000 years old. And most people are familiar with chaplains in schools, in hospitals, in the rescue services, on the waterways, in the shopping centres. But agricultural chaplains, in the truest sense of the word, are probably more subtle. At times, various folks, primarily ordained, have taken on the role of market chaplain. Often a probationary Methodist minister or a Anglican curate will learn their trade by going to the local market and getting to know people. Other more established individuals might find that they have a particular pull towards chaplaincy. Others, such as Alan Robson in Lincolnshire, Graham Hines in Derbyshire, and Keith has already told us about his work in Cheshire, and Roger Green in Cornwall, make it part of their daily working life. And I'm told that Roger started the Holworthy market chaplaincy almost by mistake or by accident. The story goes, he said to one of his local farming friends, "How can I get to know all the people in this area?" And he was advised to place himself in the market every week and see what happened. The consequence is that people across Cornwall who are involved in agriculture know the name Roger Green, and many will tell the stories of how Roger listened when they needed to share things, and so helped them along their life's journey. My predecessors as rural support workers are remembered for listening to people who, in some cases, no one else would go and see, because some of them were deemed too dangerous, for visiting strangers who were unwell or had had accidents, and not least my immediate predecessor, Alan Andrew, who did so much with others to keep in contact with farmers during the dark days of foot and mouth. As I say, the market chaplaincy is actually only an extension of that role. It is about being in people's workplace. It is about understanding the economic pressures, the bureaucracy. And if I may say so, in the exalted company who are hosting this tonight, the inspections. the political manoeuvrings, the frustrations of the weather, sharing the joys and sorrows, the good prices, the pathetic prices, the joys of new birth, desperate sadness at far too many deaths, the undoubted abilities of the cattle judge, or maybe the fact that sheep judge probably needed to go to Specsavers. In short, it's trying to understand how folks fit into their workplace, the joys and trials of work day after day, being present, sometimes literally, in the muck and mire of everyday life, being there in the ordinary and available for the extraordinary. Now, I'm hoping Chris has got a map which shows some chaplaincies and some livestock markets across Devon, Cornwall and Somerset. The first thing to say is that some of these markets are extremely occasional, just in case you think Devon has got that many markets that operate weekly. And my involvement began, first of all, at Holsworthy Market. This was partly because Kibbles as auctioneers were familiar with the chaplaincy. As I say, Roger Green had started at Holworthy years ago. They were also familiar with Liscard, where there had been a chaplain for quite a while. It's partly because Torridge and West Devon were the main operations of previous rural support workers. It's partly because, as I alluded to earlier, a previous Methodist minister had taken it upon himself to go to the local livestock market as part of his normal job, and therefore in effect taken on the role of chaplain. It's partly because at that time there were a group of ministers and vicars in the area who had been brought up as farmers, farm managers and what else have you, and therefore came together as a wonderful team who understood that area and farming problems. And that's where it sort of started in recent times. Once there was a chaplaincy established in Holsworth, and it seemed to work as a team and it seemed to fulfill a function of being there for people. I then went on to look at Exeter because there seemed the likelihood that Kibbles were going then to take on Exeter Market. And as I say, they had a track record of working with chaplains. I went off to South Molton because, again, a few years previously, the local Methodist minister had decided that being chaplain at South Molton Market was what he wanted to do. And up to Blackmore Gate, where I was fortunate to find a vicar who had been a chaplain in prisons and therefore wanted to do a chaplaincy role in the rural area in which she found herself. And the others have come since. Holworthy and Sedgemoor, I both sort of tagged on what was already happening. Exeter was a joint initiative with the Diocese of Exeter, who then had a rural officer, and with FCN. My ambition, utopian ambition, if you like, is to have a consistent chaplaincy present at all these markets, at every market that happens, and also one day to have somebody who can be at every farm sale associated with those livestock markets. I may have to live for a long time to see that completely fulfilled. The other thing to say there is that O'Cutcombe hasn't got an orange marker on it because that's the other three are ones which are either tagged on or joint. Cutcombe had a vicar in residence. David Weir, and I'll get into trouble for saying this if he finds out, was the vicar at Exford. And he did the sort of things which many vicars used to do and some try and do when they can. Because he goes to the local fete, he goes to the Exford and Dunster shows, he comes to the market from time to time, and is also a member of the Exmoor Horn Society, which shows a man who understands good sheep. And he had his own flock, at least for a time, because with 3 acres of glebe ground right next to the rectory, he thought, what better than to keep some Exmoor Horn sheep? And that all goes to help maintain the long-established link between the local church and its wide social network, which pretty well knows everything that goes on, and long-established system of pastoral care. And I wonder whether, Chris, you can stick up the final slide, which has got contact details for myself. One of the things I've tried to do in the livestock markets, but I'm not very good at administration, is to put up a board, A4 sheet with all the local chaplaincy team with their contact details as well. I have to say some of them are well out of date, work in progress. But last point really was, whilst I was thinking about this, I came across a recent copy of Country Life, and it had an article on vicars who have shaped the countryside. These included John Russell at Swimbridge, who developed the Jack Russell Terrier, Gregor Mendel with his genetics, Henry Berry with his Shorthorns, and Sally Fogden with the Addington Fund. And that article ended with these words: "The countryside may change, but the mission of vicars to love their rural flock continues." And to that you might add, the mission of chaplains is to love their rural flocks. Thank you.
Andy, thank you very much. Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's really key to hear where the history of your role came from, and it's something that it's really good to know. And from someone who sees you quite regularly at market, I think your role is really, really valuable. And I know we've had conversations where people have been to you with queries, and you've been able to approach us at Trading Standards for some clarification on what rules and things there are, and then you've been able to pass it on to them. So they haven't needed to contact us directly. Sometimes there's a bit of apprehension about contacting us at Trading Standards as a regulator, whereas you've been able to act as that go-between, and that's really valuable. That really reduces people's anxiety if they know there's somebody that they see regularly, somebody that if they do pick up the phone, they recognize, they know the face, they know your voice, they know what you're going to say and how you're going to help them. It's really valuable. So thanks very much for sharing that story with us here this evening, and again, I'd like to say thank you for everything you do. Same with the water speakers this evening. You're doing a great job, and we really appreciate what you do and the help and support that you give us at Trading Standards, but also the help and support you give the farming community. It's really, really important.
Chris,
there is a question.
Yeah, it's just for you, Andy, just to say, can I just ask how you engage at markets? Do you have an office space or do you just mingle? I don't know if you'd be happy to answer that for her.
Yeah, we just mingle. There have been talk of having office spaces on various occasions. There would occasionally be an advantage in having a room quietly, but mostly I think it's better to mingle. Most of us tend to wear a little badge fairly discreetly. As I said, most of the markets have an A4 sheet with, usually in a canteen or somewhere like that, with the people who are within the team and their contact details. But we've thought of all sorts of things, like having weird and wonderful coloured coats and things stuck on our back and all the rest of it. But I think on the whole, it probably needs to be, as I said earlier, a fairly subtle and discreet presence. And we hope that by being present on a very regular basis, that people will get to have a feel of who we are. And part of the process is making sure the auctioneers know who's around, so that if they were asked, they would know in which direction to point people as well. So that's how it's ended up.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Andy. Gillian, we've got a question from you. Got your hand up. Would you like to contribute?
Hi there. I'm Jill Fenner and I'm a parish nurse and work with Parish Nurse Ministries UK. I don't know whether you've ever heard of us, but we've started to build a relationship with the farmers market in Coventry, in Warwick. And we've attended farmers markets there as nurses to talk about health education and the holistic approach to health and well-being. So I would love to speak more to Andy, and I've taken his email down, to actually chat about your service in the south of England, where we have some parish nurses, and perhaps they may be able to help as well down there.
I am aware of parish nurses because I think I bumped into one probably at the Suffolk show several years ago. And there are other organisations, in Somerset down here, we have the village agents who also perform an invaluable role in the local area, in knowing anything and everything there is to know, and everybody who is offering help services. It's part of my role is trying to get to know what is available and work with that. So thank you for that as well.
Okay, thank you.
That's fantastic, and that's the real point in this, is getting people to talk to each other and try and provide as much help as possible. So it's brilliant that you're able to get those links together. Hi Vicky, you've got your hand up as well.
I have. Sorry, I can't see the chat function at all. It's just not coming up for me. But
Don't
I'm
worry.
all the way up in Lancashire, so I'm a very big foreigner.
Wow. Oh, fantastic.
And I was just thinking, is there a full network across England or the UK? Because are you replicated everywhere? In other words, I'm asking, is there a you in Lancashire?
I don't know there's a me in Lancashire. There is the Agricultural Chaplains Association, who I think have a full record of where there are chaplaincies established. But they would only know the ones that they're there formally. As I say, every so often you go into an area and find that, as I said at Cutcombe up on Exmoor, that the local vicar or somebody similar has felt that that is something they would usefully do. So I'm sorry I can't be specific about Lancashire, but if you want to contact me, I will find out a man who does.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Any other questions for Andy?
Yeah, sorry. Hi, Andy. It's Becky Barker again. I just wondered, because you obviously mentioned the Addington Fund, and I know Keith had mentioned that. And I just wondered if you had any. Perhaps we could catch up with you another time, just to get some contacts for you, because obviously it sounds like somebody that or an organisation that we really need to perhaps have a talk from at this and get in touch with as well.
I think it would be useful. A lot of their role has been involved with providing rural housing.
Okay.
And that's been helpful for some tenant farmers who've left their tenancy and have still been able to stay in the area they came from, or an area where there's to go. It's quite complicated. I don't know all the details, but I have some of the information, and I'm quite sure Steve Dennis knows as well.
Lovely. We'll be in touch. Thank you, Andy.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Now we move over to our last speaker of the evening. And my computer's not working properly, but it's over to you, Steve. Thanks for returning to another one of these webinars. It's really appreciated, and I'll let you carry on.
Great, Chris. Well, I'll be holding you to pass on the frames if you can, when that's okay. But just a brief summary. I've been with what was the Farm Crisis Network, now the Farming Community Network, for approaching 25 years. We started around the time of BSE, then through Foot and Mouth and everything that's followed that, the changing in farm subsidies and so forth. So there's been a lot of change in farming, and not all of it's been good, but some of it has been. So we're just going to go through a few slides, really, just talk a little bit about where we are with farming, what we see as a charity. Chris, if you'd like to flick on to the next frame, please. Flick down through if you can. There's about five or six. This was a study done by the Farmers Weekly. You might have seen it some over the last 12 months. Just talking about the what happens in farming. The average farmer works 66 hours. I expect there's some that are saying, yeah, I work more than that, and we're well aware of those. On average, those working in agriculture take only 11 holidays per year. And some would question whether they even take that. I was on a farm not long ago, and the farmer said to me, I've been married for 50 years and we haven't been on holiday since our honeymoon. And I informed him that actually there's nobody waiting to give him an award for doing that. So perhaps they ought to look again, with his wife nodding in the background. 81% of farmers said they had trouble sleeping some or all of the time. 1 in 10 respondents say they were injured in a farm accident within the last 12 months. That can be a combination of a number of different things. 36% of farmers felt they were not in good physical health. Chris, if you flick again, the 45% said that they were not in good mental health. They're probably the other way around, really, because when we're not in good mental well-being and are suffering from mental ill health, then it affects so much of everything else that we do. If we flick onto the next slide, it shows a bit of what we've dealt with in January, and this just briefly shows on the left-hand side. Hopefully you can see that, but it shows that the main reason for people contacting us was about financial issues, but very closely followed by mental health issues as well. There at the bottom, COVID related, obviously. That has affected so many, and especially with the pressures. But there are a number of things there that we often say that when there are no one issues that people contact us about, it's generally a mixture of different things that that they contact us about. This is our helpline calls. In the Southwest, we find that there are as many calls come to us through our local county groups, so our county coordinators. In Somerset, Susie Wilkinson. In Devon is Colin Smarkham. I oversee Dorset and also Cornwall as well. But we are by far the biggest region as far as contacts go, mainly due to the fact that we're in a small farm family type area. Many are tenant farmers, 50-50, tenant farmers, 50-50 out landowners. And so that's generally the makeup of the issues. Chris asked me to just touch on a bit of a typical case that we're going to, we're likely to see and what the effects on that farm is and what we can do to help. So Chris, if you flick onto the next one, please, and flick about another 4 or 5 if you can. So this is a case study. Farming family have invested heavily in borrowing. Two sons have come back to milk cows on the farm, so they've decided to invest heavily, buying 220, increasing to 220 cows and infrastructure. So they've borrowed a lot of money. Then TB strikes. And over a few months, whilst they're sorting their TB issue out or trying to, things seem to go from bad to worse. And they have a skin test that takes a number. They have a gamma test that takes even more. And the effects on the farm, is really challenging. It's starting to pressure the financial aspect. The next slide, Chris, if you could. And flick on 2 or 3 again, if you can, please. Obviously, when you lose a big proportion of your milking herd, you've lost your ability to generate cash. And it's not long before the extra borrowing, the loan isn't being serviced. It's causing a major problem. Nobody really knows when they're going to be out of TB. In order to replace those animals, to be given license by Animal Health, because it seems to be going from bad to worse. And when your herd and your cash flow, just imagine you working on a basis where you're soon reduced to 50% of your income, but you still have all your costs and all your financial obligations to adhere to. And quite obviously, it soon becomes that the kitchen table is not a happy place to be around. Relationships within the family are at best challenged. And then one of the sons that come back said, "Oh, flip this. I can't be bothered with this. You're not giving me any money to go out for a weekend. I haven't got no time off. I've got no money. I'd be better off going working for the builder." So he decides to tell the family that that's what he's going to do, and that's the best interest for him, is to clear off, and from purely a selfish point of view, but understandably so, what pressure that puts on the family. They've borrowed all this money, and really now have to work out, the parents having borrowed this extra money to a position prior to the children coming home to work, were living quite comfortably, but now they are stuck between a rock and a hard place. And how does one sort of approach and meet the challenge and keep everybody on side, really, when approaching this subject? Chris, if you can flick on to the next one, please. Working under prolonged stress and the challenges that it involves, it affects relationships, obviously, and that can be husband and wife partners, intergenerational, between generations. It affects that relationship. It affects physical well-being. It affects mental well-being. It obviously affects financial, which we've touched on. When you're working in a lonely environment, and many have left and gone and done other things, and you're working on your own, it's very possibly going to affect animal welfare because your attention is on other things. You aren't concentrating as well. It can affect administration, applying for passports, BPS or whatever can often be done too late because your concentration in your mind wasn't on the job really. And it certainly affects health and safety. And it's a concerned environment to be in if somebody is challenged by depression, anxiety, low mood, and you're driving a 200 horsepower tractor with people around you or animals around you. It can be a bit of a danger if you're not concentrating on the things you should be concentrating on. Thank you, Chris. If we can click on to the next slide. So you've been on a farm and you've seen somebody an individual that shows signs of low mood. That individual often is reluctant to talk, become very sort of inward thinking, or the opposite, can become very aggressive. And it's often the reactions of the same thing, really. It's about the feeling of losing control and not having the ability to cope with things. And it's a challenge thing, and through experience, and many of us have experienced stressful times. Stress in itself can be a good thing. It's a motivator at times, but when it becomes, there's a fine line drawn between you being in control of your business and your business being in control of you. That's very much about the ability to think constructively, but that's not always the case if you are working so many hours and working under so much strain that you are challenged to think positively about things, and that's very difficult. And as we said before, animals start to look neglected. Chris, the next slide, please. So if we go down another 4 or 5, what does FCN do? Now, FCN supports farmers and families within the farming community through difficult times. FCN as a region is made up of about 100 volunteers. Some of those are on the helpline. Most FCN volunteers have either a farming background or farmers are closely linked to farming. They know what it's like. And many of them have experienced the challenges that we go to seek to help with. So volunteers are on hand to provide free, practical and pastoral help to anybody that seeks help, whatever that might be. And many of the calls go direct, as I've said, to our local counties. The helpline, which FCN runs, this is a national helpline, and it's run 365 days a year between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. with a recorded message going outside of that. But within that helpline, we also run the out of hours contact details for the other farm and help charities. We'll touch a bit about them in a minute, but they are under the Farm and Help umbrella are the Royal Agricultural Benevolent Institution and the ARC Addington Fund, which we just talked on a little bit more. I'll just touch a bit more on them a bit later on. But calls come through the helpline that are often then referred to the relevant counties or the volunteers or coordinators within that county. All cases are treated with absolute confidence. And it's such an important thing that we're there to help and support and walk alongside those that we seek to help. Thank you, Chris. Next slide, please. So interacting with stressed friends and family, it's often a case that we don't want to talk to people because we don't know what to do if they show signs of stress, but actually showing you care will not make things worse. It'll give them some permission to talk, give them time and space to open up. We've already asked, heard about this comment from earlier on about asking them how they are and then asking them how they really are. It does sort of check. It's not the general. It's a bit like, how are you? Is a bit like asking, talking about what the weather's like, isn't it? It's a general thing. It's a way of breaking into a conversation, but then you get into a more meaningful question. But don't try to diagnose. It's an important thing not to diagnose, and it's certainly an important thing not to be judgmental. I often say to people that if I'd have gone through the experience you're going through, I probably would be feeling exactly the same. And don't try and second guess how people are feeling. And it's some of it is really common sense, but it's not trying to be scared off. It's trying to show care as much as anything else. And what we can do from FCN's point of view, Chris, if we go on to the next slide, please. We are involved with a number of things. One of the things, it was great to hear Charlie-Anne early on talking about cooking, and I would love at one of Devon YFC's events to test one of these Victoria sponges. That sounds great. One of the things that we've known has been important for us to work with is the partnership with Young Farmers Clubs, because young farmers are a way into families often. And we've got a project going on and is being refreshed now called the Rural Plus programme, which is a part of Young Farmers Curve projects. And it's talking about mental well-being and mental ill health and what to do about supporting yourself as individuals. And putting these things in place in early years, I think, is the best way in which we can try to mitigate some of the things that will often come upon us and draw us into loneliness, isolation, and this feeling of no one cares, to try and understand what help there is available. And so, that's an ongoing project, and we work with Devon YFC and also Somerset YFC to promote those programs in partnership. But one of the things that we decided to do and felt was relevant in this time of ever-changing environment, and as the family looks to coming away from Brexit and what that means in change, it's all really about what the discussions and communications are around the kitchen table. What are the things that need to be discussed? I think there's absolutely fantastic opportunity for young people ahead, but it does need a change of generational thinking to allow that to happen. And often one of the most difficult things in order to allow the younger generation to play a greater part is the older generation feeling and fearing that giving up control means that they're less of a person. It actually can put them in a stronger position to allow a younger generation with more buzz about them to come along and take on board. So I think all those things are very exciting for the future. If one can open up the mindset of tradition and allow ourselves to think in a different way. If you're anything like myself, you're starting to realize that the older you get, the more difficult things become to do. And as my school friend told me the other day, that I find it more difficult to jump a 5-bar gate than I used to. Not that I could ever jump it that easy, but age does show us that change happens. So what are the things that we can put in place? And a lot of the work that we do as the farming community often draws people around the kitchen table. I'm involved with a lot of things like family mediation, getting people to talk. You won't progress with a plan if the idea of those sat around the kitchen table is to look negatively on what everybody's involvement is within it. It's about looking at the value of each other and trying to value each other. And in this exciting phase that we're going into, and government is looking to support that change in the future, it's about valuing what the older generation have done and appreciating what they've done, whilst allowing ourselves to open up to the possibilities of change and the benefits that that might bring to the family environment, because most of that generation want a farm to survive long term, want it to go on into the next generation. And in order for it to do so, many of our businesses want to look at change. One of the links on our Farmwell website is what we're terming as a time to plan. Is looking at what it is that we need to bring on to the kitchen table to as experience as a professional at times to integrate into what the future plan might be for various reasons, whether it's accountancy, business consultancy, or whatever. Chris, the next slide, please. And it talks, Farmwell talks about three aspects, really. It talks about the business resilience, which I've touched on. It talks about personal resilience, what you can do to make sure you're in a good place yourself. And one of those things that it will touch on is doing something different, doing that you've never done before. And that for many farmers of my generation or older is a very difficult thing to do. But actually, once you get to allow yourself to do it, it becomes more and more exciting every time you try a new thing. And the support that's available and where to get that help from. And the next slide, Chris. And it's how to sort of build resilience in ourselves, because really it's about value, it's feeling of value, and it's having a hope for the future. And Andy touched on the Christian side of things that he's involved with, and that is very much about hope and value, and realizing everybody's value and appreciating who everybody's part to play within that family environment. But it's talking about personal resilience, making connections, avoiding seeing crises as insurmountable, accepting that change is a part of living, maintain optimism, move towards your goals, and that often requires a mentor to be able to do that with, take decisive actions. And that is very much about if you can, around the kitchen table, start to work not as an individual but as a team, then you will be able to share some of those things that have burdened so much, and the farming business will become an easier one to cope with, an easier one to deal with. Be spiritually aware. And I think that's really very much about what Andy's sort of touching on. But it is such an important thing. We're all made of body, soul and spirit, and sometimes some of those issues are out of balance. And those are some of the things that we need to address. But about nurturing this positive attitude towards oneself. Chris, the next slide, please. Yeah, and we've touched on this, and this is just the farming. How the Addington Fund, those that don't know it, they are strategic housing. So if you've got tenant farmers that are unable to come out of their farming business and buy a property, Addington might be in a position to help that purchase of a property in the locality that you're used to living in, and that's what they do. They fund housing support. One part that isn't on there that's starting to be integrated in partnership with FCN is the Forage Aid charity. We are working with them, and they are very specifically to do with any crisis like the Somerset flooding of years ago, when fodder needed to be brought into the area, so that they will be a part of that setup and planning exercise. Chris, if we go on to the next slide. This is just the links, if you could, but all this is available, and if Nikki, Becky or Chris want to send it out, I'm fine with that. But that's just a local coordinator contacts: Colin Smollicum in Devon, Nick Viney in Dorset, Sue Gilbard in Cornwall, Susie Wilkinson, which I'm sure many of you will know, in Somerset. And I think that's just about it. So one more, which is just the national helpline number. And that's about me. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Again, a really informative conversation with us. It's really appreciated, the work you guys do. We work quite closely on a number of different cases, and we see the work you do firsthand all the time. So yeah, well done, and thank you very much for speaking to us again. This is the second one you've contributed to, and we really appreciate you giving up your time, especially in the evenings, to come and share the great work you're doing. Thank you very much. So this is where we generally this evening's talk has gone a lot longer than our previous one, so thank you very much for bearing with us. But I think you'll agree, I think that the conversations we had this evening have been really, really valuable. And so we usually open the floor up for some questions now. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to either put up your hand or tap away in the chat, and we can have a bit of a conversation. Steve. Hi, Steve.
Good evening, all. Yeah, what a fantastic opportunity to come and join you guys this evening and witness and hear all of these stories going around. Stephen in particular has really covered a lot of my research here, speaking with my local farmers here in North Devon. Pretty much every point that I'd written down after conversing with friends and local farmers, he covered it. And so what a fantastic presentation there. Must have taken hours. So yeah, I'd certainly like some contact details from yourself, Stephen, and yourself as well, Chris. So yeah,
of course.
Fantastic effort.
So I've popped my email address in the chat there. Nikki Rattenby, my colleague, she's put it in there as well. So feel free to send us a message. Sam, did you want to go back to Steve's contact details from before? So that the other Steve can have a look at them. Is that okay? If you go back one more, yeah, Steve's phone number's on there, at the bottom there. If you're happy to have a read of that one. So but thanks very much for the feedback, Steve, as well. Appreciate you popping your hand up and contributing. So thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to raise a point or ask any questions? We've got Ellie. Hi, Ellie.
Yeah, just that the young farmers groups have been mentioned several times, and wondering about ways of demonstrating services like my own and the ones in Devon, Somerset, and FCN as well, doing tremendous pieces of work and just raising the profile. I think there's a lot of pressure. We're seeing a lot of referrals from young people generally, and just wondering about showcasing to the YFCs across this area.
That's fine. I think possibly, I'm not sure if she's still online. If I can email you, if you can give me an email and get in touch. Helen from Devon, I know quite, but my children go to young farmers in Devon, so I know them quite well. So I tend to be a bit Devon biased, based being Devon based myself. Please ping me an email and I'll forward over your Helen's house, and then she can share the details. She's the Devon area organizer, but they all work together across the southwest. So I will forward over your contact details, and hopefully you can have a conversation. And then Billy's sharing some details in the chat as well about how to get involved with CALM.
Chris, can I just say that the Rural Plus programme that FCN are doing with YFC is being refreshed, and it will include contact details, the likes of talk work links, and various contacts that are relevant to young people.
Great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, and maybe we can do a bit more if we have to see what interest there is, but maybe we might do another one of these conversations again later in the year. So it may be something we can include as part of that, a bit of an introduction about Rural Plus as well. That'd be fantastic. Thank you, Keith, for sharing your information as well about how to contact the Gay Farmer Helpline. Again, you know, your contribution tonight is really appreciated. So thank you very much. We've also got Billy's in there, and Ellie shared hers earlier on. What we will do is everybody who's registered will get a copy of this recording. So we'll be able to try and turn that round as quickly as we possibly can. But again, it takes a few minutes or two to get through the DCC systems. But we'll get that turned around as quickly as we can and forwarded out to everybody. But you've got my contact details, Nikki's and Becky's, all in the chat there. So please feel free to get in touch with us at Trading Standards, and we'll be more than happy to share contact details or point people in the right direction to speak to each other. That would be no problem at all.
I just wanted to mention and just thank everybody as well too for speaking tonight and throughout all the webinars we've done. This year I think they've been massively successful, and they've grown throughout the year. So it's been it's been really, really well received. And I just want to say that we're hoping to roll out some more next year. So if anybody has got any further, if they want to speak again, or they know of anybody else that they think we should get on board, then please, get in contact with us and let us have that information. Any ideas, any positives, any negatives, any feedback at all was really, really appreciated. We're trying to keep it quite sort of informal as best we can to encourage people to get involved and attend. So yeah, we're hoping that it hits everybody's sort of levels really. But yeah, if there's anything that we can take forward for next year, we'd really like to hear from you. So that's it. So thank you very much.
Definitely. Thank you to all the speakers again for this evening. Again, everything you've contributed has been really, really valuable. Thanks to the people that have chipped in and given us some extra points. And thanks to people for tuning in from all over. And hopefully we'll see you at a future session. Thanks very much.